Alright, so I'm not going to click the big red button that says stop broadcast, which is exactly what I did moments ago. Which is why you may have watched the 34-second edition of the Supernatural Side Salad show. This will hopefully be slightly longer than that. Uh, we have been joined by George. Um, I'll let you explain what happened, George. Then we can talk about it.
Yeah, well, most people would have heard about it. Basically, in Denmark, in Copenhagen, there was a free speech event. I'm not sure who attended, but one of the attendees was the Swedish cartoonist that is already on the death list. And he was Wilkes, I think his name is, and he was the potential target. They failed to miss him. From what I understand, one person that happened to be in the neighborhood or was attending the meeting was shot dead, and another one has died later on because now there are two presumed deaths. Um, what I understand from the CNN that they quickly figured out which guy they were after. So because they were monitoring his house for about 4 hours, and when he returned. And somewhere between that, because I'm not 100% sure of the timeline, somewhere in between that there was a second attack on the Jewish community, but he failed to kill anybody there because the security was heightened at the moment. The second attack I noticed. The first attack I didn't fully notice. I vaguely monitored it during the day, but the second attack was just before I wanted to go to bed. I turned on CNN because I always watch the news prior to I go to bed, and it was just 11 minutes in. But by now they have caught the guy. They knew where he lived because they caught his image on CCTV, and he was a known criminal in Denmark. So they monitored his house, and when he returned, they approached him and he opened fire, and they shot him dead. And that's basically what happened. And it's another attack on the freedom of speech, basically.
Yeah, it's very sad to hear from this side of the country that something like that's happening in a European country like Denmark. I mean, you just think that it's something that's strictly, more isolated to, you know, Islamic countries and, well, not Islamic countries. Now I'm gonna get myself into deep do. Um, the Middle East. I mean, places that where there's actual civil unrest and things like that. But you wouldn't think that somewhere where people are pretty well educated, you know, there's good facilities and things like that. It's good, um, yeah, that people would be doing these types of things.
Yeah,
So who was this guy representing? Was he just representing himself, or?
no, from what I understand, he had a criminal past for gun possession already, so he was on the police radar. But he was basically a petty criminal, and they said on TV that he was probably inspired by the Paris events. So
I
basically, he's a lone wolf.
mm, yeah, I'd read sort of anecdotal things which probably aren't true. They're probably just racial things, but I don't know. Apparently, people there was apparently saying that he was yelling in Islamic or something like that. But I mean,
Yeah,
all we know
but
is that he was just a
yeah,
known
he's
criminal.
a native of Denmark,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
people aren't sure about what he was yelling. It could be that he was yelling something in Arabian, but that hasn't been confirmed. But I guess we'll hear about that later on.
yeah. Well, I guess I mean it's amazing that these cartoonists are the ones getting. I mean, it's a shame, really. I mean, hmm. You don't want anyone being in the firing line, so to speak, but it seems that politicians around the world are just so weak in what they stand for. It seems that um, the petty cartoonist who's actually getting to the crux of things is the one who's being shot at. Um,
Yeah, that is basically what I told prior we went on to air, and then the others within uh, in one of the Google communities, atheist humor and memes, the sister community of the atheist community. I put a lot of cartoons there that I've drawn myself, and some of them are much more offensive than what that Swedish cartoonist drew. He basically drew a sketch-like picture
yeah, it
of
was
uh, of
nothing.
of Muhammad or Allah as a dog, and I my cartoon is basically much more offensive, and it's not that I'm afraid that once some Muslim sees my pictures and sends it out on the community worldwide and that they go after me, I'm not really afraid of that. It would be odd it would happen just because you are trying to be humorous and funny and perhaps spread a small message in some way and that you're being targeted for that. And that I really can't get it in my mind why people are like that. Because I'll put up a link of the last cartoon and I basically put this online 10, 15 minutes before the show went online. And this is basically my last cartoon, which I put in the community. And this one is about the Wailing Wall, basically. And for a Jewish person, that would be pretty offensive.
I think
And that's
sometimes
Yeah, that's I'm to say that's the kind of style I draw in. Sometimes a little bit erotic, satirical, sometimes a little bit sadistic, and it's easy to offend somebody with something like that. But it's no reason to kill somebody over it, so I don't understand.
well, I think what I was going to say was the when an ideology is so weak that it has to crush even the smallest amount of dissent or ridicule or what have you. I mean, it speaks to the overall message of what they're pushing. If you have to attack somebody who's drawn a cartoon, it doesn't say much for your message, I guess. It just kind of makes it seems to me like it's a bunch of little kids who are throwing a hissy fit about a cartoon. It's a drawing. It's like a piece of paper. It's two-dimensional, for Christ's sakes. You know, it's absolutely outrageous, and it does make you think, well, why would somebody do this? And it's because their message is so terrible and so weak. When you even dig even just a little bit into it, that uh, they have to they have to push that hard. I don't know if that
Yeah,
if that makes any sense, but it seems like even it's like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so to speak. You know what I mean?
yeah, 'cause, uh, ba- uh,
It's just to the
basically,
extreme. It's to the absolute extreme, to the point where, like you said, I mean, you draw a cartoon, and it's just an expression of free speech. But who knows? Maybe maybe there is somebody out there who would take such offense to go ahead and track you down, and it seems absolutely crazy to me, and I'm sure it does to you too. But there's no
That's,
doubt that there are these people out there. Yeah.
yeah, but unfortunately, I don't know who or whether necessarily the current sort of ISIS sort of, sort of, I don't know, sort of terrorist sort of people, whether or not, um, I mean, we talk about it from an outsider's perspective, and it's easy to say, well, you know, well, I would assume that, they must believe that what they're doing is going to lead to a good outcome, ultimately, somehow. But I'm interested to know if that is genuinely the case, if these people do genuinely believe odd delusions about what might happen in some sort of afterlife, or whether or not Yeah, and what I suppose leads people to sort of not be able to see outside of, I suppose, that ideology or that belief set, to be able to see, you know, what's a
Well,
reasonable action and what's not, because clearly it isn't a
yeah,
reasonable action to blow yourself up, but it becomes a
yeah,
reasonable action once you have this belief that there's going to be a martyr's reward for you at the end of it, sort of thing.
yeah. I think the first thing you have to do is just start with an education, and I guess that education has to be really narrow, it has to be very specific, and it has to be thorough in locking down your ideology into a person such that they would never question it, never, ever, ever question this. Uh, and then convince them that the world that they live in is so far below what is possible for them that it's useless to them, and so that the highest honor that they could have is to sacrifice this menial little life of ours to get this great reward. If you can get somebody, I think you might be surprised at how easily people could be indoctrinated into these things. I mean, these are extreme people and they do extreme things, but we have extremists everywhere, don't we? We have extreme Christians, we have extreme Muslims, we have extremist Buddhists, and we have extremists everything, religious, political, everything. And it seems to me that what you really need to have is a limited, thorough education, like narrow in scope, but thorough, so that there's no way that they themselves can refute it. And then you have to have a reward, a payoff that's so great that not having that payoff is is would be hell. I guess is probably the easiest way to have is to say it. Um, that's the only way I could see going forward with something like that, because it doesn't seem to me like they're stupid people. At least the people who are starting uh, uh, these actions. I mean, it does take some sort of education, or it does take some sort of knowledge to not get caught, to be able to pull these types of things off. But at the same token, uh, if they knew much more about the wider world, you'd have to think that like they would choose a different path, because the world that we have has a lot to offer, and cashing out early like that for a prize, that to me just I mean, 72 virgins, are you serious? Now I gotta teach 72 people how to fuck? Really?
Yeah, and it's odd, but intelligence has got nothing to do with it. That's the odd thing. Because look at on the Christian side, William Lane Craig is a very smart guy with a great education, but still he says the most ridiculous and stupid things. And
For
and
him,
it's the
I was gonna say, I
yeah,
wonder if the payoff for somebody like him is to me at least, it seems like his payoff is now. He's cashing in now, and I think he might have some belief. I'm not sure he really buys all of what comes out of his face, but he knows he's cashing in now. And if there's a bonus at the end, great. And if there's not, well,
yeah,
whatever.
but
You know what I
but
mean?
but in the people that follow him, there would also be doctors and smart people and teachers and people with high IQs, so that will follow him and that will take him on his word. Perhaps because he's an educated man, and perhaps that's also in danger in having smart people in on the religious side, because they think, oh, he's a smart guy, so he must be right. But basically, smart people can do stupid things. We're human after all, so.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. You can be indoctrinated and trained into anything. And the more, like I said, I think the more narrow you want to focus your attention, the more easily you can block out the rest of the world. So like a person like William Lane Craig, I think he's locked it down to the point where he's got himself psychologically comfortable. Um, he's comfortable in that he makes his money, he makes his living, he does what he does, and whether he believes it or not is okay by him, because maybe he doesn't believe he's hurting other people, and it doesn't seem like he is hurting other people. But on the other side of the spectrum, the people who are buying him hook, line, and sinker and are not taking into consideration their own futures, and they're just living by what he's saying now, they really are putting something on the line, and they're doing it even though they might be, doctors, lawyers, these types of folks. they're, you know, like I said, they're focused. They've got this narrow scope of education or what have you, and what they don't see outside of it is that they're getting taken for a ride by this guy who claims to believe, and at least, you know, maybe he does. I don't know. But
It's really
I,
hard though
I,
because oh, sorry, you go, Dylan.
I was just going to say, no problem. I really don't think William Lane Craig could possibly believe what he claims to believe. I don't think he could possibly believe that the Kalam cosmological argument is a good argument. I think he knows, most likely knows the holes and the flaws in his own logical claims. Kalam, for example, has been debunked to shit, and he knows it, and we know it, and he plays ignorance in some cases. I've seen interviews with him where he pretty much strawmans the valid arguments which have been made against his position in order to rebut them. But he seems like a smart guy. Surely he must understand the arguments against his position more clearly than that. And to have to straw man people to rebut their claims, I don't think he really believes what he claims to believe.
I think he believes that what he says makes him look smart and it makes him money. I think he knows it gets him an audience.
That's right.
And I think that he also knows that every time a new person comes into contact with his wide assortment of information, I don't know if you want to call it that. I mean, it is what it is. But every time somebody new encounters it, that he has the possibility of getting a few more dollars, a few more clicks, a few more whatever it's going to take. We just have to be maybe prepared on the other side to, you know, have those rebuttals, have those refutations handy, so that when that person also wants to know the, you know, what's the other side of the story, then you can kind of come to this side of the fence and say, yeah, William Lane Craig's full of shit. Here's how much full of shit he is, and here's the pile of shit, and this is what it looks like, and this is how bad it stinks, and let me run you through it, and you know, I guess that's what aggravates me about it, is he does it, he knows he's doing it, and every single time someone walks into it, he just puts on that stupid smile of his, and it's like, welcome to the flock, buddy. You're about to get fleeced, and it's remorseless to me. Like I can't understand how you can do that to a person repeatedly, and then when you're called out, I mean, essentially called out on your beliefs on what it is that you're preaching, to have the call to just keep going. Like between him and Ray Comfort, it's like, oh my God.
It's really difficult when you look at especially Ray Comfort, I think. But I can think of a few ways in which you could sort of justify being a charlatan completely trying to deceive people if it meant that they were going to give their lives to Christ. Because there's this stupid idea in the Christian circles, which is that it's all about the souls saved in the end. I mean, let's be real. What's more important, eternal life in heaven with God, or pissing a few people off, I suppose? And so what he could be doing is thinking, well, I believe in God for all these other reasons which people don't accept, which is fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out here and sell this really poshed up sort of philosophical, sounds pretty kind of, argument, and sort of throw in a little bit of actual Christianity is trying to postulate, his culture of Christianity, his model of Christianity, and yeah, and then his mind, he might think, well, yeah, I'm bullshitting, but guess what? I've got 3 million people signed up and saying they're giving their life to God and to Jesus, and that's got eternal rewards, millions of eternity, and 1,000,000 times eternity of reward. That's so much better, than the few dollars that they're giving me here. I mean,
I got a simple thing you could present him with. You say, I'll tell you what, you let us hook you up on the lie detector, and then we'll ask you point blank, the money or the soul saved? Which is it? You just watch. I mean, I'm sure there's
Well,
there's a
I'm not
far more
trying to speak
scientific
out in
way.
his defense. I'm not. I
No, no,
wouldn't
no.
even. I wouldn't say that that's necessarily how he feels. But I mean,
No, but I think he knows he's bullshitting, and I think he knows that his bread and butter comes from bullshit. Because if the message was as good as the message is supposed to be, he wouldn't need to spice it up the way he does. And he certainly would be happy to do it for free, don't you think?
Yeah, but that's also a kind of point that I wanted to make, but I wanted to add something. Suppose he does believe that there is a God, but he also know he's bullshitting people with a lot of things he is saying, then basically that makes him a liar, and him being a liar would mean that he's going to hell.
I'd love to see a situation where, I kind of always imagine these folks when, they pass on and they're sitting there. If there happens to be a God on the other side of the, on the other side of the white light, well, I guess we've always entertained that idea. What would
is
I
it
say,
more?
or what would they say? I can imagine, William Lane Craig sitting in front of, God, and it's kind of like, so, dude, what the fuck? Like, what the hell was all that bullshit? Like, I laid it out as simple as could be, and you said all of this nonsense to these people. Get in the hole. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just if it was as simple as it's supposed to be, I don't understand why jump through all the hoops. You know what I mean? If not for money. I mean, when people knock on my door, it doesn't seem like they're after money. They seem like they're genuinely trying to push a message. When I get the pamphlet from the the poor guy down the street who's just he really believes. But then I see these guys like, William Lane Craig, Ray Comfort, all these guys, like you said, charlatans, and it kind of makes me sick because the arguments are so convoluted for the simple man that they just fall into the trap, and it's like it's a different kind of speak for those people who think they're, like you said, doctors, lawyers, etc. People who are educated, they hear big words in long sentences, and they don't stop sometimes think they're being run down the highway of bullshit. You know what I mean? And
So you said in the chat.
they just make me sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Say what you said in the chat, Dave, because it's. I think that, I was going to make that point that you just put there, but you wrote it. So.
Which bit? Sorry, we're having a bit of a chat.
Just about how I'm going to end up saying it. The last thing you wrote in the chat.
Oh well, I think Craig is an interesting one because he does sound well. He makes something very intuitive sound incredibly complicated, and that's what the column is. It's saying, he throws out a lot of sophisticated sounding words and names of people he knows, like, oh well, philosopher so and so says this, and Alvin Plantinga says this, and so on and so on. But it's accessible in that everything that begins to exist has a cause. Not many people get tripped up by that notion. So the entire point of apologetics isn't to give a defense to people who don't believe. It's to reinforce the beliefs of people who are maybe having doubt. So they read a passage like Exodus 21, I think it is, the slavery passage, and go, hang on a minute, this God doesn't sound very loving because he's saying all this thing about slavery. So they go to their, whoever it is, William Lane Craig or their local, pastor or whatever it might be, and go, I'm having a bit of trouble with this, and they say, don't worry, blah, 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 blah. There's a reason for this. God works in mysterious ways. It was a different context. Insert, excuse there. But William Lane Craig is an interesting one because, like you say, he should know better. I'm pretty sure he's got 2 doctorates. Is it one in philosophy and one in theology, I think. So he should know better. But, he's basically come out and said, I know Messianic Manic has done a few videos about this, he's come out and said, even if all the evidence pointed away from Christianity, I would still know it's true because basically I have a warm fuzzy feeling in my stomach, or the self-authenticating witness of the Holy Spirit. The second one sounds a bit more sophisticated, but it doesn't matter, if you take away his justification, if you, dismantle the Kalam, and let's face it, every YouTuber, it seems, has done that, and if you go through, I've gone through the modal ontological argument, I know other people have. If you go through all these arguments, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you can remove all of their justification. Something is still maintaining that belief. There's still a reason why they believe what it is they believe. And it might be a pragmatic thing. It might be William Lane Craig doesn't want to lose his job. His cushy lifestyle of, he can earn I don't know how much doing public speaking and doing a debate and so on. So there's social pressures, there's pragmatic, he needs to pay the bills sort of pressures, there's cognitive pressures, there's emotional pressures, and it's incredibly difficult to shake all those off, to say, I'm misleading a few people with my argument, but like I say, if you think you're doing a good job of, well, I'm saving people and getting people to God, that's all that matters. Lying is okay as long as it's for Jesus. That, pothole of 54 video sort of thing. So, yeah, I guess that's my thoughts on the tripe that is William Lane Craig's career.
It seemed he sort of backdoored his way in some ways to his. I mean, apparently the papers that he's written that have made journals that are peer reviewed basically have nothing to do with the types of things he goes and spends most of his career talking about. I'm pretty sure there's I think George just linked the Wikipedia page of him, but I think that it shows that the two things that he has, his papers are just nothing to do with philosophy. Well, I think they are to do with philosophy, or anyway, I'm not going to quote it, but you should check it out, because I mean, it's just clearly not. He's overstepping a little bit.
Yeah, I think his supposed expertise is the philosophy of time. So I might be wrong there, but if memory serves, I think.
I
defend.
Yeah, I know I've heard him say that.
I saw on the
Yeah,
page that
allegedly.
doctoral studies on the cosmological argument, and that's maybe something more, but that's one of the things he did his doctoral studies on.
I think his shtick is defending the A theory of time, if I'm not mistaken. So that's it links to the Kalam in that the Kalam relies on the A theory of time, but it's wrong. Well, it's not wrong, but relativity pretty much doesn't really follow the A theory of time.
Because
I'm not an expert.
A theory of time. Can you just quickly tell us what A theory of time is?
Okay. A theory of time is, I guess, what we intuitively think of when we think about time. I think I always get it wrong.
Well,
so if someone,
it's always there, sort of. Well, that it's always
Yes.
sort of, it's always there, yeah. And but our current understanding of anyway, you explain it.
I know soccer does a really good explanation of this. So if you're about soccer, but basically, the B theory of time is basically that everything has already happened. It's just our frame of reference that's out. I might be getting that completely wrong, by the way, but I think A theory of time is basically events happen one after each other, okay? And that there was, or is, an infinite timeline, I think. Oh, no, sorry, there was a finite time. Hang on, I'm going to look this up.
Is it predeterminism, or is that's not in his
Um,
sort of thing, or it's sort of open, it could be. It's more just about the existence of time itself. Like,
Yeah,
did time itself did time itself begin with the universe? Like, is it constrained within the universe? Like, is time not even a thing outside, like whatever's before that or what's around that?
sorry.
Pre-Big Bang type thing. Yeah. Or in different universes, time's different. I don't know. Yeah.
Essentially, the context didn't first hear it, but the context I was listening to it was a conversation between Sokka and Seamus, who was talking about the notion of God being omniscient, all-knowing, and predestination, determinism. So he was arguing that A theory of time doesn't necessarily imply determinism. That was his point. Or was it B theory of time? No, B theory of time. And the Kalam cosmological argument relies on the A theory of time. In other words, he's trying to have the cake and eat it too. He's saying the Kalam argument is true, or is a good representation of God's existence, but that relies on the A theory of time. But the B theory of time is where you can have free will, essentially, and a God who's omniscient. So he was kind of trying to speak out of both sides of his mouth of, look at the Kalam, isn't it a great argument? Oh, look, we have free will, all the while missing the point of their mutually exclusive views about time. You can't hold both positions, essentially.
Yeah, there's a funny joke about that, because if you have a God that is all-powerful and all-knowing, does he have the power to change his own mind?
Yeah, or there's a lot of those. Is it make a rock you could never lift? Is it make a rock you could never lift?
Too heavy for me.
Yeah, too heavy that he could not lift it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's sort of
I don't think it's the best objection because I also think the response is particularly unsatisfactory. It's the logical possibility sort of thing that God can do anything that's logically possible, which when you actually come down to it means that he can only do things that are consistent with his nature and consistent with the nature of existence. In other words, God can only do what he can do and can't do what he can't do, which pretty much sums me up as well. I can't do anything I can't do, and I can only do the things I can do. It's just God has more things that he could do. So, I can't build a rock. Well, I can make a rock so heavy I can't lift it, or I can keep adding Lego bricks to a pile in which I can't lift up, if you want to use a better analogy. But
Yeah,
God can't.
but if there are things that God can't do, then he can't be all powerful.
Well, the argument is that things that then the argument becomes: is something impossible because God can't do it, or is something impossible because it's just impossible? And the answer then becomes: well, it's possible to do something that God can't do because impossibility is independent of God, if that makes any sense. So basically, God can't lie. There's nothing logically impossible about that. Lying doesn't violate any logic axiomatic rule. It only violates God's nature. So that's what they're actually saying. So it's based on the notion that it's logical possibility. So, Hogtie, please save me from the A theory, B theory thing if you can.
Oh yes.
I was dying on the arse.
I
Take it away.
want to. Sure. I want to appoint myself as the perfect person to explain this, not because I know it or understand it to any extent, but because I understand it to a layman's level, and I think we're looking for this sort of one-wit layman's description of it. My understanding, it sort of hinges, and it's an elaborate thing. There's lots of things, lots of consequences if you look at one theory versus the other. But it's like anything. Like, let me compare it to to relativity, where you can start relativity with a very simple observation, right? That the speed of light is constant in all reference frames. It's a simple one-sentence description of it. But then there's all these other things that fall out of that they're just sort of mind-bending, like the fact that time doesn't flow at the same rate, and that things like the simultaneity of events is itself relative. I mean, it's all a mind-bending thing. So I'm just using that as a comparison. It's like that. You can start with one sort of nugget notion, and then from that a bunch of weird stuff happens. So my understanding, the main nugget here is whether or not a particular point in time or frame of time is privileged. So let's say I were to ask you, here, let me ask you a couple of questions, like does George Washington exist? Right? Would you say, if I ask you this question, does George Washington exist?
Well, he existed, didn't he?
Yeah.
All
So
of his
you're
stuff is
hesitant.
still here.
Yeah.
Stuff is still here. Teeth, the purported wooden teeth, which apparently is not true. But
Well, I mean, even below that, like, take it. I mean, like, there's nothing that he was that is not still here, right?
Sorry.
There's nothing that was George Washington that is not still here. I mean, the amalgamation of all the atoms and everything. I mean, his particular collection, yeah, it's gone. I guess you would say
Yeah.
that specific collection, but all the bits and pieces are still here. So, does he exist?
Yeah. Let's go. Yeah, all his atoms and whatnot. But yeah, let's go all gestalt with it and say that, well, George Washington isn't the collection of atoms that happen to have been assembled into his being. Rather, it's the actual George Washington-ness, that there's an essential collection or organization of matter that made for George Washington. And we're agreeing. I think everyone is certainly hesitant to say, well, yes, he exists. We will say things like he existed. The concept of him still exists in people's minds. The matter that had coalesced to form him still exists. We'll say things like that. But as far as saying George Washington as an essence exists, we would not be comfortable saying that. How about this? Does my great grandson exist? That one's a lot easier to say no to. Although he certainly exists as a concept, right? I mean, it's logically possible that there will be a point in time that my great grandson will exist. And then let's contrast that with, let's say you're in a car driving along the highway in the dark. Conveniently, you have headlights that would illuminate that small space around your vehicle. So you can be certain as you're driving your vehicle that there truly does exist a highway, at least a portion of the highway that's under your car. You can see in the headlights just ahead that, like, oh yeah, there's, as long as I keep driving at this speed, there's still road for me to be on. And let's say that you're driving between, I'm going to say, Sedgwick and Botha. just to confuse people. And you're halfway
Nobody knows
between.
those designs.
I know. Well, you guys start talking about High Wycombe and whatever else. Nobody knows what you're talking about, so I'm going to go with it.
I think that was your reference to Victoria. Anyway, yes.
What was that? Reference to Victoria.
Oh, I said Victoria earlier in the hangout. It probably wasn't. Anyway, carry on.
Oh, okay.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Okay. Nobody knows where these places. I could have just made those towns up. Elbow, Saskatchewan. Yeah. Do they exist? Yes. You're halfway between. You've left Sedgwick. You're 20 minutes left away from the town of Sedgwick. And does it exist? You can look over your shoulder and you'll not see it behind you. You won't see Botha in front of you. All that really exists in your current frame of reference is that little patch of highway around you. So would you be sort of intellectually well placed to say, well, Sedgwick existed, but it doesn't really exist now. The concept of Sedgwick exists in my mind, and the concept of Botha exists in my mind. But those things don't really exist because in my reference frame, all that really exists is me, my car, and a little patch of highway that's illuminated around me. And I think that's the central notion here is about the idea of a privileged reference frame. So we tend to proceed in our lives with this view that this concept of now is a privileged reference frame. There's something unique about this very moment that is different from all other moments on a timeline. We can draw a timeline and we can say, well, here's when Jesus walked the earth, if you're inclined to say that. Here's when George Washington existed. Now is when we exist. And then in the future, there's going to be, the 50th president of the United States, and my grandson, great-grandson. All these things are concepts that are going to be in the future. And we do tend to look at our privileged reference frame, this thing of now, as being things that really exist are the things that really exist right now. And then there are things that used to exist but don't necessarily exist anymore in that form or in their essence. And then there are things that might exist in the future, or if you're a determinist, will exist in the future, but we wouldn't say that they exist now. That's sort of an A theory, very intuitive approach. B theory is, if I understand it correctly, is more like the highway analogy, where the only thing unique about this particular point in time is the fact that we're making observations about what exists at this point in time. But as unsettling and counterintuitive as this is, it would be incorrect to say that the things behind us in time don't exist, right? So it's as if you're illuminating time frame by frame by frame, and we feel that our current frame that we're viewing is the privileged frame, but in fact there is no privileged frame of time. All times actually exist equally, and just subjectively from our perspective, this is what we get. David asks in the side chat here, is this linked to Lorenz's view of time? I don't know. I would have to wiki that. How embarrassing is that?
I think there's nothing embarrassing about that, right?
This is the wiki hangout. It might as well be sponsored by Wikipedia. That's our first point of reference. Anyway.
Yeah. Actually, that's a privilege. Yeah. Well, it's funny because there are a couple of sort of the evangelical Christians in particular that hold a lot of hangouts. I think people know which one I'm thinking of here in particular. If you're in one of his hangouts and you say, "Well, I'm going to look that up," or he'll accuse you. He'll say, "Oh, you're Googling that." Like I love the disdain for the human enterprise in our current reference frame in the 21st century here. We've elected to communicate, to interconnect all of our computers, right? Mostly for exchanging pornography, but I'm sure there are other reasons. But we have things like Wikipedia and Google.
Gambling. Weapons.
We just have all this. We live in an era where we have access to information at our fingertips, and there are these evangelicals that will express disdain for people who would like, oh, I'm going to look something up. It's just horrifying. But no, I wouldn't understand. Go ahead, please.
Oh no, it's mind-boggling. Like you're feeling down, you're feeling depressed. What should I do, Pastor? Well, I think you should, pray to God and ask God to do something. And you just sit in a corner or sit at the end of your bed or lay in your bed and you're just wailing to yourself, where you could be accessing this. I mean, the amount of data that's stored online at any given time is just astronomical, and it has data from, years and years ago. We have all the, data from, people writing things based on previous texts and other things like that. It's just you could find why you're in, I feel down. I'm feeling depressed. It's a state of mind, or it could be
Yeah.
linked to this, and I can do these actions which will improve this and potentially lead to different outcomes where I'm not feeling this way. I mean, really, we're past this. Praying to, and hoping that things change, or as such, you can do certain things and make certain changes. But yeah. Mm.
It's a godsend, pardon me the word godsend, because just look at the early 90s when the internet was basically still basically non-existent, and it was then you had to have books and look in books to look stuff up, and when we're talking about a subject online and you didn't know something, then you had to go out first to buy the book to look something up before you could talk about it further online. And now you can just go to Wikipedia and or look on websites. So for people like me that have very bad memory, it's really really very, very helpful.
Yeah, I think we used to have a very strong reliance on experts and their expertise, and it sort of put us in a precarious position. Whereas now, I mean, there's a trade-off, because the problem is that there's so much, information, and loosely call it that, out there. As some of you know, I've been since the Ebola outbreak. I've really been following this vaccine thing, and of course now it's really hit the news with the measles in the U.S. And I am surprised how many people, and why I'm surprised, I continue to be surprised by how many people in these comment exchanges will say things like, educate yourself. Like, here's a link to freaking natural news. Educate yourself. So there is a lot of information out there, but a lot of it is just garbage. And I think unfortunately we've got people that are, I don't know if it's sort of, junk food in the trough kind of a problem. There's no way to control the internet that we could sort of filter it, and only good information would be on the internet, and porn, of course. But
good and bad.
Good and bad for it. Well, I had the beholder.
It won't discriminate. It probably doesn't. It doesn't discriminate or anything. I mean, it's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the ways to verify the things that you can read and see online. I mean, the simple sorts of little tricks that, even the basic things that you learn, library introduction class 101, the first semester of college or university or whatever, where you just learn, look, you can put any shit on Google, and just because someone has a website and they've just written this nice, eloquent piece, it doesn't mean that the claims they're making are factual. Where are their references? Who are they citing? Where are the texts or the journals or the we have that type of a system. We have an academic system, at least, and which has its flaws, but at least that people still just read, and they get into the emotive language of these things. I love reading them sometimes. You ever clicked on those that one weird trick to shred weight and do nothing, or that one thing that everyone's been keeping from you, or that George Clooney or Brad Pitt haven't told you about yet. And you start reading, and it sort of throws, it just brings you on this journey. It sucks you in at the start. It sort of starts saying, oh, all those sort of other fad diets, and it'll give you a few examples, and you think, yeah, they're bullshit. Yeah, this, this things might be under something, and you keep reading, and it starts going, and it throws a couple figures that have nothing to do with anything, like, I don't know, 1 out of 10 people want to lose weight or something crazy. I don't know, something silly. And then you get to the very end after all this, you spend all this time invested into this thing, and it's like, now you have to pay to get the secret tip or the fucking supplement or whatever it is. And
it's one of the things I've always wondered about, because ad on websites. As far as I know, I've never clicked an ad on the website, so I'm always wondering, how do these people make money because I never click on diaper commercials to say a basic thing or something like that. I also have an ad killer on my Mozilla Firefox to avoid uh, commercials on YouTube and stuff like that. And I never click. Or I always go to where I want to go, and I never click on something on the side. So I always wonder, how do these people make money? I don't understand.
I think they're paid a fraction of a penny for each each visit to that web page, whether or not they click on the ads. As long as the ad loads up, they get a fraction of a penny, and then there's a bigger payment if the person actually clicks on it. Those so-called referral payments. Um, but yeah, it is interesting how much junk is out there. And actually, I just popped in the side chat here it's Mythology put this up. It's a 2-minute and 40-second clip of Ozymandias Ramses II talking about uprooting religious dogma. I don't know how long the original video was, but this person very wisely clipped out a rather brilliant 2.5 minutes from it, where Ozzy makes the point towards the end that, like, reasoning is something that's fairly intuitive, like walking and talking. But good reasoning, good critical thinking is something that actually takes skill and practice, and it's a lot more like reading than it is like walking and talking. It is something you need to be cultured into and something you need to practice. And I mean, I don't like when we blame the internet for people picking up bad information, because people have whatever cognitive processes they bring to bear when they try to decide what's good information and what's bad information. I mean, there have been nut bar conspiracy theories around a lot longer than there have been web pages. And people aren't going to change just because now there are a bunch of web pages and Wikipedia and Google and things like that. They're not going to change. I mean, just today I had an experience. Did you guys hear this weekend about the deaths of about 36 babies in Syria related to tainted vaccines? Had you heard about this?
I have not heard this, no.
No, not from me.
This is... Yeah, and this to me was sort of an informative, and just this morning I saw this, and it was sort of an informative, because I read that and it was like one of those things like, well, why would all these kids? I mean, there's always some death rate attached to, or adverse event rates attached to vaccine delivery, and it's usually expressed in the cases per million, right? And to have like 36 babies just suddenly die in a couple of days is shocking, right? So obviously it's not something related to the vaccine itself, and these vaccines have been delivered. And it's just one of these stories that, like, when you get something like that just sets off your radar, like, what is wrong here? And you look down in the comment thread, and then you see other people, how about let's look at the actual news story, and people post the links to the actual news story. And like so many other things happen in this anti-vax world, the news story is actually from more than 6 months ago. They just keep recycling it, not putting the date on it. And you're like, this just happened. And they say, and they're looking into it, and it might have been a terrorist attack where they were tainting the vaccines. So the story is that, yeah, these 36 babies died. They're saying that it's a terrorist attack to help destabilize faith in the local governments and the health system there. But none of this is confirmed. They don't say, well, this cell of whatever extremist group put this poison into the vaccines. It just says, this is what they're thinking it is. Well, then, the story isn't confirmed. There's no confirmed aspect of the story at all. And then the whole theory that it was a terrorist attack, again, completely unconfirmed. This whole thing full of speculation. And the anti-vaxxers will post on there, they'll say, aha, like this is the conclusion they draw from that story. Aha, us as Americans, we should not be vaccinating our children. Because that logically follows. That somewhere far off in the world, something happened that made somebody put up the story as a rumor on a webpage. So the actual story... more than 6 months ago, and they believe it was about 15 babies that had died, and over 70 children that had received these errant injections, was it because of some similarities in packaging, some of the healthcare workers there, and remember this is a war-torn part of the world, this is not sort of the best educated people working in healthcare, made a mistake with the packaging and accidentally delivered muscle relaxant, like surgical caliber muscle relaxant, to these very young children, most of whom had enough body weight to tolerate a little bit of muscle relaxant. Obviously, it knocked them out. But the younger ones, the babies, the 6-month to 18-month-year-old, like once they're qualified for vaccination, they're very small. A lot of those died of respiratory failure before they even made it to the hospital. And that is 15. So 15 babies died months and months ago because of a misinterpretation of packaging. And
look what follows. There's a controversy out there, or there's a percentage of people who are interested in clicking, for these things, looking for these things to see if they're there, so people can get ad revenue and can get hits and can get clicks, and so
Yeah, put
you're
something
inevitably going to
controversial.
find, and that's another excuse for. I mean, it's a typical thing they complain about on Reddit. Repost. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you're just piggybacking off someone else's success.
Yeah.
Previously.
Yeah, it's a problem. Well, what I've started doing, or actually I have for quite a while, but I say what I've started doing since venturing into this anti-vax discussion is when I see a story like that, I mean, wish there was a way to click on the link that didn't generate revenue for them. But yeah, you do want to check it out. But more often, what I'll do is I'll take the keywords from the actual story. So like, Syria vaccine, dead babies, whatever, and do a search for it and find the actual news stories.
Yeah.
And you'll quite often, not quite often, actually, it's in every case you'll find, like that guy from Natural News has a big thing up, and it's been reposted hundreds of times, to my knowledge, in the last few months on Facebook and Google Plus, that the court ruled in favor of was the CDC, not the CDC whistleblower. That's a different case. There are two people that are present under the false. The United States has this thing called the False Claims Act, which is a bit of an unusual law, where people can file a lawsuit against somebody who'd sent a bill to the American government, and these people are acting on behalf of the American government. So if we were American citizens, we could just go to court and say, Boeing just sent a bill to the Defense Department, and we're going to sue Boeing, claiming that that was a false bill on their part. And if we're victorious in that lawsuit, the American government gets a share of it, and we get a share of it. So these two individuals who were used to be employees of a drug company have filed one of these false claims actions on behalf of the federal government against this drug manufacturer. And the drug manufacturer, of course, had immediately filed a motion to dismiss. And the way a motion to dismiss works, just on the odd chance you don't know, is that the judge basically looks at the claims put forward by the plaintiff and says, hypothetically, if the claims are true, does this lead to a problem this court can solve, right? So like if I were to sue you on the theory that your dead grandmother was haunting my house, and therefore you owe me money, the judge would look and say, look, even if that actually is his grandmother and she's actually dead and she's actually haunting your house and it actually caused these problems for you, this court can do nothing about it. So granting your version of events, it doesn't actually lead to a claim, so that would lead to a dismissal. But if my claim were something like, well, you were driving your car on the road and you hit my car and you did damage to it and you owe me money for the car, the judge says, well, if that story's true, then yes, he would have to pay you money. The court can deal with this. So let's go forward and find out about these facts. So anyway, that's what happened. Was it was a motion to dismiss, and the judge said, well, this is a legitimate, if true, we need to go into fact finding to find out if it's true. But if true, these guys would have a legitimate claim on behalf of the government. Well, the buddy at Natural News is, of course, putting this out there like these guys essentially won this case, and that absolutely proves that there's just widespread, institutionalized fraud going on with all the vaccine manufacturers. And it's a simple thing of like, somebody puts up a link on Google Plus and it's something naturalnews.something. Okay, forget it. Don't even click the link. Do a search for the actual story and look up the story. The only reason to ever go to Natural News to get the information is when you're trying to educate yourself, not about the underlying issue, about vaccine safety or about legal cases, but when you want to educate yourself about the meta issue, about how douchebags like the guy that runs Natural News intentionally misrepresent news stories to get people to come to his webpage.
You can do these kind of searches not only for text-based messages, but also for images. Because I came across, and it's basically a bad website, but on LiveLeak, a well-known website with all kinds of trash, and there was a dual photo there of one with a small child and one with a child dead. And I already noticed there was something off with this. And then basically the small story beneath it was that this girl was killed in front of her mother. But I noticed that in the one picture, the girl had a different color pants. So I took the two images apart and I looked for them separately via Google image search. and I looked for the first occurrence of each image, and they existed several years earlier than the alleged story, and one was in Palestine and the other was in somewhere else, and they existed from each other several years already, but also 2 years apart, so they were not linked to each other. And sure there is some tragedy behind the original photos because it was a dead girl, but it was basically used for a propaganda effort to entice for Syria, and it's really sad that it happens. And but you can do those kind of searches yourself basically, and never when you see something and it doesn't have a real source behind it, always be in doubt.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I want to give a recommendation for something for people to go check out. One of the best sources, and it took me a long time to warm up to this. And just every time I go back to the site, I just think, man, these guys have it nailed down. Snopes.com. And I know you've all heard of it, but I'm going to spell it anyway. It's SNOPES, Snopes.com. And it's like a collection of urban legends. And it's great. When you hear something, do a search for it on Snopes. The caliber of the research is so good there. But here's the best part, is that when you read some of their editorial things, they give you really good tips on how to, like, what are the get out of here, cat. What are the elements of a story that tip you off that it's BS? And here's one of them, and you mentioned it just a moment ago, George, and this also happened in the example I was giving about these children in Syria, is that when a story starts out with something like last night or earlier this week, blah, 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 blah happened, right? But there's no reference to the date in the story, right? Like when you look at actual news stories, there's a date associated with the events they're reporting. But a lot of the BS that gets posted and reposted and circulated around the internet, it'll just say yesterday or last week, or it'll just be this timeless B theory. These stories almost exist perpetually, like in a B theory of urban legend bullshittery. So that's one clue. The other thing is, like, you got to read some things. Like when there are elements to the story that are retold that couldn't possibly be retold, nobody could have known about it.
Third person.
Well, let me give you the example. I hesitate to give the example because it's so disgusting. There's a whole set of urban legends that are based on sexual moray. Right. So here's a really famous one that isn't all that gross, but it's like the story about the woman, sometimes it's a man, who would get sexual pleasure by applying peanut butter or jam or whatever to various body parts, and then getting the dog to, etc. But then some people came into the house and it was a surprise birthday. This story is like decades old and has been retold many times, usually amongst teenagers, because it's a weird sexual moray, right? And for some reason people find that stuff funny, and it gets to be part of the urban legend culture. So there's one story that's on there that you probably haven't heard, and did you put on the 18+ rating on this thing? I won't tell the story. I will just say it involves a woman.
Actually, didn't tick the box, but.
Oh yeah, well, yes.
Swearing pretty fast.
If you'd known I was coming on, you should have. I'm not going to tell the story because it's so disgusting. It's so disturbing and disgusting. It's just the kind of thing that makes teenage girls go, oh. Yeah. But anyway, it's a woman and her pet lobster. And in the story, she dies, right? And again, you think it's gross because the dog thing is just weird. You had is it?
Yeah, like years ago. It is awful.
Yeah,
awful,
it's awful.
Just awful.
But console yourself with the fact that it's clearly not true, because one of the things that happens in the story is that she's, shortly before she dies, she's feeling very ill, and she goes into the bathroom. And if you read that description of what happens in the bathroom, there's this sound that's described. She heard this incredible schloop. There's this weird sound that she hears in the moments before she dies. But how does anybody, how is anyone in a good epistemic position to know what the sound sounded like in the moments before she died, because she was alone? And I mentioned this in my delightful meandering. You guys are entertaining the meandering so well. If you read Snopes and start to develop your skills tune up your bullshit detector a bit, so that you're able to, when you read an account of something, recognize that, wait a minute, how is this reported? How is anybody a witness to this? How did this story get around? Why? What are the motivations for a story like this getting around? Do that, and then go back and read the Bible again. And you recognize so many stories that you're like, wait a minute, how did this get reported? My favorite, by the way, John chapter 3. I'll tell you, let me read for you John chapter 3. I'll do it from memory. Zubba, 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 blah, 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 something, something, something. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son so that those who believe in him will not perish but have everlasting life. And blah, 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 zubba, zubba, zubba. That's the constant.
Such a sweet, kind, such a moving passage that is. It really is. I'll say it is. Anyway, Karen.
It is moving. Well, unless you read the lines after it that say that it make it expressly clear that those who believe in Jesus as Son of God will have everlasting life, but everybody else, they're already doomed. Like there's just nothing you can do. So it's not about works or being a good person. It's entirely about whether or not you buy the BS story, according to the author of John anyway. I like asking Christians, who was talking in John 3:16? Who actually said those words? A lot of them won't know. Some of them will know that it's red letter stuff. It's actually Jesus saying this of himself, purportedly. And then I'll ask, well, who's he talking to?
Because he's
very
God.
few. Yes. Very few Christians will know that this is a conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus. Nicodemus was clergy amongst the Pharisee, who was was he clergy? Oh, here come the correction. Here come the correction posts on Google Plus. Hogtie, he was not clergy. He might have been. I don't remember. But anyway, he was a Pharisee, and he would. It opens. John chapter 3 opens with Nicodemus approaching Jesus at night. The context understood to be that he didn't want Nicodemus, that is, did not want his brethren to know that he was actually exploring this Jewish rabbi who was claiming to be the Son of God and was actually sort of entertaining this seriously. So he would approach Jesus secretly at night, and they would have secret conversations, of which he would tell no one that these conversations took place. So Nicodemus and Jesus are having these secret meetings. Nicodemus never tells anybody that these meetings happened. There's no report of Jesus ever telling his followers, hey, by the way, Nicodemus swung by and we were talking about this. So none of the two participants in the conversation ever told anyone the conversation ever happened. And yet we're led to believe that the author of John knew word for word what Jesus had told Nicodemus about the message of salvation. A message of salvation, by the way, intended for all of humanity. And yet Jesus only told the one guy secretly at night. The kind of story that if it were circulated around through email would have made it on a Snopes.com as utter bullshit.
If you want a... Sorry.
Yeah, no, you go, Dave. Yeah.
I was going to say, if you want a less, I guess, disgusting example of these sort of urban legends, I like the Ricky Gervais one. And it's about a stockbroker who's working in a really high skyscraper and a very important businessman. And he's going to get a call at 4 o'clock, okay, if his business is going under, if he's broke, if he's destitute, if he's lost all the money, basically. 4 o'clock ticks round, and so if he doesn't get a call, then I've got it the wrong way around. If he doesn't get the call, then he's broke, essentially. So 4 o'clock ticks round, no call. So he thinks, oh no, what am I going to do? Oh, sorry, no, got it wrong way around. If you get a call, then then your business is broke. And so 4 o'clock ticks around, and then nothing happens. And so he doesn't get a call, so he thinks, well, I'm going to have to kill myself. I've got no money. I've just lost, $10 million. What he does, he goes to the top of his skyscraper and jumps off. And then as he was passing his window, the phone was ringing. Now, intuitively, you hear that story and go, oh, that's a bit weird, and things like that. But then you think, who told that story? Who knew all the information there? That the phone was ringing as he was hurtling towards the ground at whatever miles an hour. And that's the sort of, when you just hear it, you think,
good one.
I told it completely wrong. Someone edited it out, so I said it in, seamlessly. But it's that sort of, you've got to you hear it and think, oh, I can go along with that, and then you realise, well, like I say, I'm not a massive fan of the sort of Jesus is a myth sort of thing, or whatever it is, the not Ken Humphreys. Is it Ken Humphreys? No, Jesus never existed, sorry, I should say. I'm not a massive fan of that because I think a lot of it is sort of uber skepticism. But one good point he does raise is the sort of thing you're talking about, the conversations that no one else could have known about. For example, Jesus. We're coming up to Lent, and the temptation of Jesus, and who told the story of Jesus with the devil, of seeing all the world and things like that? Because I don't remember him saying. By the way, I had a chat with the devil the other day, and he was trying to tempt me with these things, and it's one of those events that. Who was actually, making a note? Who was hiding in the bushes, going, "What was that, devil?" I didn't quite hear the second sentence there. So no, I think it's one of those good examples within the Bible, like you say, of how did they actually get hold of this information? And ignoring the fact that it was decades after the event it was actually written down, the fact that no one, it was never transmitted to anyone as far as we know. And like I say, with the John 3:16 one is a very good example.
And also the story of was Noah or Moses having sex with his daughters. If I was him, I'd make sure nobody ever heard about it.
Yeah, that's Lot.
Yeah.
I said Genesis 8. I got the wrong chapter. Yeah, Lot and his two daughters were the survivors of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Lot's daughters were mistakenly in the belief that the destruction of those cities meant the destruction of the world, and that they needed to repopulate the world, but they couldn't possibly talk their father into having sex with him. But well, I mean, maybe they told the story because they both got pregnant from it, which is fascinating. Like they got him so drunk that he was incapable of recognizing. So he's in a cave. There's only 3 people in this cave. This dude and his 2 daughters, and they got him so drunk that he was having sex with his daughter in the cave, which he didn't recognize as his daughter because he was that drunk, and yet scored a goal. And then the next night, he's that drunk again and has sex with the other daughter, functionally, and gets her pregnant. And anybody who's had to go for whatever the counseling, not counseling, the fertilization, it's really hard. I would imagine it quite difficult to get two virgins pregnant in consecutive nights.
It's just not even something that discuss at church. They're not even things that people discuss at church. I mean, I went to church for close to 20 years. Well, I was obviously a young child for most of those years, but I mean, certain people have discussions and things, but I mean, most of the time you just go there to socialize, to sing some songs because it feels good, to have cookies and coffee because fuck yeah, and hang out with everyone, and hear about why all your failings in your life aren't as big of a deal because there's a bigger picture and God's taking care of that, and let's be on your way, and you all look fabulous, and yeah.
And I was nowhere close. It's Genesis chapter 19. I was nowhere close. I did have to look it up. That one is funny though when they say about this relationship with church and what we're taught about the Bible from church gatherings or any sort of mentorship through clergy. I have asked people this. I haven't done it in an online conversation, but as rarely as I get in a religious discussion with people, sort of in my real life. This is an issue I've raised. When I'm talking with the sort of Christians that are like, oh yeah, I've never got around to reading the thing, I'll say, well, I mean, there's some things that culturally connect, right? So I say, for example, the phrase "pillar of salt." Where does the phrase, "pillar of salt" come from? Or what does it refer to? And they will all remember, oh yeah, that was Lot's wife who was punished for her defiance. They were told not to look back, and she looked back, and she was turned into a pillar of salt. And I'll say, okay, well, what happened before that? Well, what happened after that? They, of course, will not know that before that, Lot had offered up his daughters to the gang-raping flash mob. I steal that phrase from, what's his name? He does the Cole's Notes versions of Bob's Notes on Bob Schmierfak. Is that his name, Bob Schmierfak? But not really. He refers to it as the gang-raping flash mob. But yeah, he offered up his daughters to the gang-raping flash mob. And then, of course, afterwards you have the bizarrely pornographic drunken scene with his daughters. And I'm yet to encounter a Christian in my actual sort of day-to-day life that has any awareness of what happens. Oh, the pillar of salt thing. You better make sure you listen to God. But they
There was
don't
a
know
lot
what
of
happened before after.
I'm surprised. Is that depiction exactly of that story? Is that exactly the same way? In because there's all these wacky versions of the Bible these days. There's like New Living I mean, well, actually, I think that one's quite an old one now. New Living Translation. But
NIV is
there's
the new
all
one.
sorts. Oh, okay. Well, but there's even more than you think of. Like there's scary ones that there was one my sister got. I mean, thankfully she's sort of not in that way anymore either. But she got this book. It was called How to Be. It was like Teens and God, or it was. I don't know. In some way, it was aimed directly at teenagers, but it was a Bible. And so it was saying that it was the Bible, but it was chopping things. It had sort of like boxes, which like in a textbook, they were more like textbooks. So you'd have a box which elaborated on a piece of text in the Bible, and so what you found was pieces of text which sound mortifying, like slavery and things like that. There'd be this text box saying, "Did you know that in society back then?" Whatever BC, and it would try and make it somehow factually historical, and people used to own slaves, and it was considered okay. And okay, but we won't get into the moral sort of dilemma of a god who has slavery, but anyway.
On the topic of I guess not remembering, I guess what happens after the event. My favourite one's Noah's flood, because when you're told it as a child, you don't really think of the ramifications of the flood. But what I find more interesting is you ask, well, what happened just after the flood, for example, and very rarely will people remember the story of the tent.
Sorry.
And I just think it's just incredible that he was the most righteous person to save. And, well, you celebrate once you've just survived a giant flood like that. And how do you celebrate? You get a little bit drunk, you end up in a tent naked, and you get uncovered by your sons. Isn't that not what people do after you, save your family from a flood? Maybe it's just me, I don't know.
Can I answer a question that just came up there about how these stories are represented in the different biblical versions? And I wonder if certainly stop me if I'm misinterpreting the question, but none of these stories are any different. When you go from one version to another, I mean, we'll sort of take exception to different versions and say, well, it depends how you. And there are some subtleties, like theological differences, that come into play, but the actual stories, the narration themselves, don't change from one to the other. Mosaic law doesn't change from one to the other. Sometimes, I mean, really, it's to do with readability. So I'll give you an example here, and this is one I think I've mentioned before on the Magic Sandwich Show as being one that sort of, when I sort of going through the Bible again, was sort of confused as a teenager. So King James Version, this is Deuteronomy 23:1, not taken out of context. It's literally where the chapter starts, and later goes on to talk about how you're not supposed to return slaves that have escaped. So it totally changes topic after this. It's like a single line. Nothing taken out of context doesn't rob it of meaning. Anyway, it says, King James Version, "He that is wounded in the stones, or hath his privy member cut off, shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord." And I remember being confused by that. What is wounded in the stones? What's his privy member? And conveniently at Bible Gateway, you can say, oh, that's KJV. Let's go to, what was the one a lot of people like American Standard Version. Let's try that
There's
one.
NIV, there's New Living Translation, NLT, I think.
Yeah, NIV's pretty, a lot of people like that one. Let's try to find a New Living Translation. NIV, "No one who has been emasculated by crushing or cutting may enter the assembly of the Lord." The sentiment is precisely the same, but I think, novice readers would not. Sorry?
It's sort of more modernized, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, it's more clear. Like, you aren't sitting there wondering, well, is it literal, or is it figurative, or is it a metaphor? No,
This
I mean,
is the Bible you could sell today. Right here with all the flashy gizmos and language.
Yeah. We'll do a little better because over here the American Standard Version quite popular.
Wait, so the original's no good enough? Are you telling me that the original text? But surely the original text it's the best book in the world. It's the best book we have. Surely the original is the best.
It's inerrant.
What?
Yeah,
That tells you that the Bible's full of shit. That's because the sequel's apparently better than the original.
but there is a problem with the different translations, especially when you just mentioned Deuteronomy, and he had a discussion about this, and I also made a video about this a few months ago, and I had a discussion about it a few weeks later on Google Plus, especially the part about the marriage laws and what happens when a girl gets raped. In one version they use a lot of different words to describe a woman. They say a woman, and then they use the word maiden, and then they use girl, and in other versions they only use woman, woman, woman. And what happens when you talk about Deuteronomy, especially when a woman has extramarital sex or she is raped, you'll hear the Christians say that I think it's 27:28 somewhere, that's not talking about rape, but it is clearly talking about rape. Deuteronomy 22, 27, 28, something like that. And it's clearly about rape, but when you read one version, it's kind of, how do you say that, smartened up, and it looks nice and neat in English, and it doesn't look like it's talking about rape. But when you go to another version, it's basically, it literally says when she's raped, and then she has to marry the guy that raped her. It literally says that, but when you use another version, and that's the version they always quote, of course, then it doesn't say
Yeah.
that exactly, and then you have to interpret the whole section very clearly. But mostly of the time they start with, I think, 26 or 23 somewhere, and they forget the first part, which actually talks about marriage. And they say that, well, 27, 28 says when the girl and the man has sex, she has to marry him because she had sex, and basically that's what happens when you have sex. But that's not 27, 28. That's the earlier part,
Yeah.
21 to 25, 26. That talks about what happens to a girl when she wants to marry the guy. Because
Yeah.
back in those days, the girl didn't had a choice. She was basically the possession of the father, and the father determined which guy she had to marry.
Yeah, I think you nailed it exactly. Just one second, I'm talking to my friends. I'll be right there in a minute. Yeah, I think you nailed it exactly, including the right citations. So that, yeah, and it's Deuteronomy 22, and when you get to, thank you, 21, 22 in there, they are talking about, sorry, 21 is the marriage. They're legally married, found her not to be a virgin. 22 is about a man lying with a woman. I'm just scanning through it here real quick here. Man lying with a woman not to be that they're not married. But then 23 is if there be a damsel that's a virgin betrothed unto a husband, and a man find her in the city and lie with her, etc. So it talks about that, doesn't specify. But then 25 it says if the man find the damsel that is betrothed in the field, and the man force her and lie with her, then the man, the man will die. And it's not that hard of a read, and especially because there are these concordance versions out there, and you can go back and see our best understanding of what ancient Hebrew meant. You don't have to do that. That's just bracket now. Okay, can you stop? Go upstairs. I'll be right there in a minute. Where they shift gears from talking about when they're married, and then when they're not married but having consensual sex versus when it's a rape. I mean, it's very clear in the text that where they're changing gears. But I think you're exactly right, George, with the correct numerical citations. But yeah, I think where the problem is that when they try to soften it, like you can pick up a different version. If you're dedicated to going back to the original text, you're going to find these things. But if you're just like, well, I'm going to flip through and use one of these sort of watered down versions, they can change the message, but I think not successfully, because every other version would have gotten it right. And as an aside, and I will have to go ahead and get sort of attention drawn away here, but I think one of the problems, like, can you imagine trying to codify criminal law in the modern era where you don't properly distinguish between the various sections and subsections of the law, where there's consensual versus non-consensual sexual contact? In the modern era, that's unthinkable. I think in ancient times it was less of a focus because consent was kind of a thorny issue, I think, in terms of women giving consent to sex. And just as an example, I want to both kind of shout out Run Gabagai Run. Just guy does great material and is so good in Hangouts. Had raised in a Hangout a while ago. I think it was one of G-Man's Hangouts called Matt Dillahunty. Is he that effective, or how effective is Matt Dillahunty? That sort of thing. One I had been in and got kicked out, and then Run Gabagai Run got kicked out for a similar reason, and that is bringing up scripture in a way that they can't answer. So, what was the scripture he brought up that I thought was so compelling? They asked him for an example of sort of sexual slavery, like where people that owned other people, would have sex with those people, and he, of course, had read out this section using the King James version about women being taken captive, damsels being taken captive. And you'll remember this part. I'd have to look up to get the address for it, but it's about you have to shave her head and trim her nails and take away the clothes that she was wearing when she was captive, and sort of let her regrow hair and nails and stuff, and sort of give her that mourning period and sort of make her anew. Well, then you can have sex with her. And it doesn't say expressly, well, you really should check with her before you have sex with her or shave her head. You just do these things. You shave her head, you cut her nails, and then when the time is right, according to the law, you go ahead and do your thing. It doesn't really speak to whether or not she's giving consent for any of these things, because again, at that time, I don't think it was really an important issue, especially for someone who's a captive. Do you have anything you want to add? Do you have anything important? What is 3 plus 5?
3 and 5. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 8.
It's 8. Okay, good.
Nice job. Okay, so had we burst into a void of silence while I was gone? I did.
No, I've been talking constantly. And my son has a follow-up question. Why is that cat holding a flower? He asks.
George will have to explain that one. Although I fear Google may be responsible for that image.
Well, I had a cat like that once, but I never had a photo of him as a kitten, and I thought that was a cute photo, so that's why the cat is holding the flower. He's just being cute, so I can enjoy the memories of my dead cat.
I think it
great.
represents. I think it represents a Venus flytrap because George can snap, but it looks appealing and safe. No.
I actually bought a Venus flytrap today.
Is there a
That's
lot
my
you
contribution
have
to
to do to take care of?
Is it big enough to eat cats? If it was big enough to eat cats, then you would have a perfect foil for George's avatar.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say
that's
you.
good.
I can't believe I said that. I'm being urged and encouraged to provide snacks. So I always enjoy hanging out with you guys, but I will excuse myself, and thanks for the entertaining chat today. Are you waving bye? You gotta be up.
Sure, until the next time.
Okay, see you.
Okay.
Good job. Well,
It's a Chartreux cat, by the way. So they originate from France.
yes, so it has geographical context to connection to.
I actually thought Hogtie was offering to give us snacks, so I'm a bit
Yeah,
disappointed.
I was actually expecting him to. Yeah. Is that you, Quantum?
Hi everyone. What are we talking?
How is it possible? Okay,
Seeing
hang on
double.
1 sec. I think I can rectify this, but Quantum, you start talking.
I'm not really sure what we're talking about. I just popped in.
It's kind of went. Hogtie just left, so we are devoid of a topic for the moment. We were just talking about how we thought he was going to get us snacks, but instead he's giving his son snacks. So there we go.
The last thing we basically were talking about were firstly we talked about I don't know how to say it. When we were talking about corrections in the Bible and interpretation of the Bible. That was the last subject we were talking about, basically.
Okay. I'm here now. So yeah, I haven't been here at all this whole time, so I wouldn't have a clue what's been going on. But well, initially started the hangout, which lasted 34 seconds, and we had to do this reboot, which has been going on. But yeah, there were a few topics. Hogtide brought in more of the discussion about the anti-vaccination sort of thing, which was also covered on the Magic Sandwich Show last week. Rethink was here earlier, but I booted him by accident because I had him muted and couldn't unmute him, and thought I could just boot him and then have him rejoin, but that didn't work out.
Okay. I read the paper that you sent me, Dave. It was interesting, but I don't pretend to understand it.
Well, I find it funny because I was watching the discussion between Trey Jadlow and Alex Botton a few days ago, whenever it was, and I think Alex brought up that the paper, or mentioned it and saying the Big Bang might not have happened, and Trey Jadlow just dismissed it and said, "Oh, it'll be gone in 3 years," and it's nonsense. I love the fact that you are humble enough to say I didn't understand it, whereas he just immediately dismisses it. I might be wrong. Trey Jadlow may be the next, Stephen Hawking. He might be a physicist. I don't know, but my guess is he isn't, and he's just immediately dismissing it. But I just want to say I'm very thankful that some people, I'm going to be a bit arsey and say it, some people are very humble and say, I don't understand this, and some people just immediately dismiss things for no good reason. And that's, yeah, I just find that very interesting.
I'd say that you'd have to have at least a graduate level understanding of physics to be able to read that paper. Well, maybe a maths undergrad could understand it, but yeah, it's a horribly I mean, I recognise that there's a few tenses in there. I mean, if someone like a creationist is just reading that paper, I don't believe that they would understand it. I don't understand it at all, and I've been doing physics for a long time.
I was going to say, I got tripped up after the 8th word, and I was like, oh, it went downhill quickly from there, so I thought, like I say, I know that you know a bit more about this than me, and if you didn't understand it, I'm guessing Trey Jadlow may have heard it from a creationist who mentioned, oh, well, they're just trying to excuse the Big Bang or make time eternal because then it gets rid of God. That sort of analysis rather than, well, reading the damn thing themselves, essentially. But no, thanks for taking a look at it, and hopefully it was interesting if it, even if it did hurt your brain a little bit, because I stumbled on it quite a few times, and yeah, as a humble psychologist.
Sorry,
Karen.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it's frustrating how open the conversation is in a lot of the areas, in physics especially. Well, not so much open, but I mean, the possibilities, that are still quite vast in terms of what we understand, but yet people are willing to go, no.
Well,
God over here or religion over here, and it's definitely the case that this is the way things are, and it's just, I don't know.
I was having a chat with. Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I was going to say I was having a chat with someone just before I came on, like 5 minutes before I came on, and we were talking about whether intelligent design is actually an explanation, comes from an intelligence is an explanation or not. And I was like, it's incoherent gibberish, but he was saying, oh well, he mentioned string theory. He's like, oh well, something about God and string theory. I was like, really? I mean, first of all, string theory, is that the best you can come up with? But it's just sort of the fact that they and when I say they, it could be anyone, it could be any group advocating anything, but it's they jump on science when it supports them. And that's the thing, and Hogtie sort of, I guess, danced around the issue of like confirmation bias and disconfirmation bias of, when you read something or watch something that you don't agree with, you're hypercritical of it, okay? And that's something that I think we're all maybe not aware of, but if I show you a picture of an ostrich, you're going to be like, yeah, it's an ostrich, I've seen them before. If I show you a picture of a dinosaur, then you're going to be like, hang on a minute, from what I know from primary school, I remember that dinosaurs aren't knocking around anymore. So then you're hypercritical and think, well, where did this picture come from? And I did a video about this exact premise of a video apparently of a dinosaur, and it turned out it was from Jurassic Park, which is probably the most famous dinosaur film ever. But trying to get a video from that and trying to claim that as proof of dinosaurs takes a special kind of person. So, but that's the thing some people just don't have this. Well, they have disconfirmation bias, but of a view they're critical of, but their view is sort of immune to this in that they accept belief confirming evidence almost at face value. And I think that's the problem, that when I encounter an anti-vaxxer and they say, oh, well, read this blog, I often do. And then, for example, there was one that was like 28 papers that confirm Andrew Wakefield's study. So you know what I did? I read each one. And I realised that, first of all, it was actually 26, because I think there was a couple of repetitions, which is amazing, first of all, that they're allowed to, people just cite this as, 28 papers and don't actually read each one and find out the repetitions. Then you read, there's at least two, maybe, there's like 2 or 3 that are from the 1970s, i.e. like 20 years before Andrew Wakefield, so how can it support something that came before it? So you can keep dismissing them, first of all, but then you actually read them, and literally none of them support what they're saying. None of them actually, well, almost none of them mention the MMR vaccine, first of all. None of them, some of them don't mention vaccines, and basically when they cite this, it's like, see, like he's proven what I'm saying. And I say, well, actually, do the pothole of 54 thing and read what they're actually advocating. And 9 times out of 10, it's not what they claim it says. But because we have because I have this we all have this disconfirmation bias of things we're critical of. But we need to recognise that we're also prone to sort of confirmation bias. And if people have been watching my series about the psychology of belief, I'm trying to sort of humble people and say, we're all prone to this. We just think we're right because we've got the science behind us, but we're still prone to this sort of, confirmation bias and disconfirmation bias. They're no different to us. We just have, I guess, science behind us, and they just have blogs written by weird people who don't seem to read whatever they're citing. So
I think that you can become more consciously aware of yourself, sort of falling and tripping up to these sorts of things. When it is initially that sort of emotive thing, by simply, like you say, being aware that we do suffer from this, and we fall to it, even when we think we're not. We can be shown that we are falling to confirmation bias when we think that we aren't. But by being more emotionally and consciously aware of your own self, and that, okay, this is a subject that I'm about to engage with, which I disagree with, so I'm going to really try to maybe extend a further attempt to try and grasp it or understand it or find out exactly where it's come from, and these types of things. I think that having that as a sort of tool going in, if everyone sort of embraced that, I think it would sort of help in that way.
The other thing is, which I keep promising to mention, but I still haven't done a video about it, is self-affirmation. So basically, we want to see ourselves as a good person, okay? And then what it means to be a good person is someone who's sort of good in that environment or good in that culture. And obviously that depends on what your culture is.
Well, that's our own. Is it sort of that? I mean, like, it suffers from the fact that it's your own sort of understanding of what's good or what's
exactly. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I don't mean culture as in Western culture. I mean, for example, we have a YouTube atheist culture, for example, and a good person in that culture is someone who's like a skeptic and someone who maybe advocates science and so on and so on. Whereas a conspiracy theorist culture is one who endorses or has the same sort of goals and values as conspiracy theorists. In the same way, Christian culture or fundamentalist Christian culture, and it's their own little culture. So it's what a good person is someone who has the same goals, values, behaviors, and so on in that specific sort of group. And so, what self-affirmation? How to resolve dissonance, which dissonance is basically the uncomfortable feeling we get when we encounter something that violates our feeling that we're a good person. So, for example, if you smoke, and we know smoking is not great for you, so when you think, I want to see myself as a healthy person, I'm engaging in an unhealthy activity, there's conflict there. I'm saying I want to be healthy and I'm doing something unhealthy. How can I resolve this? And one fundamental way of doing that is self-affirmation. So by basically not convincing yourself, but by telling yourself essentially that you are a good person, independent of this sort of dissonant cognition, that you're just a good person. So the reason why confrontational conversations are so counterproductive for many reasons, but one of the main ones is self-affirmation is good at when you're treated with respect, like a Christopher Mouty, that sort of person, that you can have a civil disagreement. you feel like a good person because you're not in a slagging match, you're not in a shouting match about, whatever it is. You feel like a good person, and when you do that, you're more receptive to the argument. Because if it's confrontational, you can just immediately dismiss it and say, no, you're just being unreasonable, and so on and so on. But when you actually feel like a good person, then you're more receptive because you don't have this threat to your self-worth, or as big a threat to your self-worth. So because you feel like a good person in this situation, I guess, then you're more receptive to what's the word? Contradictory views or a belief-challenging evidence. So, but that's the short version of it. There's a bit more nuance to it, and but it's a very interesting.
I would say that I think that you can understand the negative impacts of something and still be doing it and not think that that's what you want to be doing ultimately.
Oh yeah, there's
or that it's not preferable action on a scale of probability in terms of what would not go wrong and over what period of time and that type of thing.
You can resolve it in, I think, probably 3 main ways anyway. So there's self-affirmation one. You can change your behavior, first of all. It seems obvious, but you can stop smoking. If you don't like the fact you're smoking and it's unhealthy, you can just stop. Obviously, in the real world, that doesn't really work like that because, like I say, addiction or dependency or whatever you want to sort of call it or anything like that. But the other thing you can do is basically engage in these cognitive biases and distortions to justify it. Basically, you rationalize it rather than you go, well, I know my granddad was 92 when he died and he smoked since he was 12, so that for me is all the evidence I need.
Somehow that reduces my indivial probability of getting emphysema or cancer or something like that.
Exactly.
As if you're not an independent, I see what you're saying.
Or you could say it relieves tension. So, for example, if I'm doing an exam and I'm feeling a bit stressed and then I smoke and I feel less stressed, that's good for me. In a way, it's helping my health because I'm feeling less stressed. I can do more revision. It's another way of rationalizing it. It's still dangerous, but it has a wider conflict. In the same way that I don't know if it's the same around the world, but the National Lottery in England is also a charity. So you're saying, well, by doing the lottery, I'm also helping build schools or whatever. I don't know what the National Lottery actually does, but you can rationalise it by saying, it's it's what, £1 a week, so that's nothing, or whatever, or maybe £2 if it's 2 games. I don't know how much it is. I don't do it because I know the odds aren't in my favour. So, but you can rationalise it by saying, well, I'm basically giving to charity. It's not that much money. It's harmless. I might win a lot. All these help you do it. Help you overcome this dissonance of I'm spending money for something that I'm almost certainly not going to win, and obviously it becomes more severe if it's more severe gambling, so it's a gambling addiction and then problems. So but yeah, I mean, dissonance avoiding behaviour is basically everywhere, and we just and it's largely unconscious, which is probably the scary thing, that we don't even realise we're doing it. And I think that's what, and when people confront you, that's the only real time because obviously if you knew you believed something wrong, you'd change it, But the thing is, I don't know when I'm wrong, and when people correct me, I take that as an attack, and therefore, we exhibit these defensive biases and so on and so on. So there isn't really a simple way of changing a belief, but self-affirmation is one of the ones where it's like, okay, there's something there, but it's not a silver bullet remedy by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, it's well, it's very interesting. It also brings back to what we were talking about at the beginning, actually. I'm not sure that it went to air, actually, about how we're talking about casinos and gambling addictions.
Yeah, were we on air then?
I don't think we were, but in any case, it was sort of more...
It was mind-blowing, whatever it was, whether it was on air or not.
Well, that was the thing, right? Didn't we solved all the problems before we went on air, and then...
Now we're just killing time after...
Yeah, I thought that was the thing. The 34 seconds, there was a little bit there, and then we solved all the world's problems, and we came back, and now we're just shooting shit, right?
Yeah.
So I had an interesting...
I thought I was interested in what Dave had to say. I mean...
I didn't mean it in any offensive way. Actually, I was thinking while Dave was speaking about how, in kind of small things, like in smoking or bad behaviors, it's, you can almost get your head around it. But when it comes to, like we were talking earlier about extreme, whether it's religion, politics, these types of things, that cause people to do serious harm to themselves. I mean, it does take some awful amount of confirmation bias or self-affirmation to blow oneself up into a bunch of little pieces and take others with you. So when you say it's scary, it's absolutely scary. How a human mind can do that sort of thing.
What's more scary, how quick it can happen, because you often hear the parents, because only 6 months ago he suddenly changed, so it's pretty recent. Perhaps he's been looking into it earlier, but from a certain period of time, short period of time, he suddenly changed, started dressing differently, and poof, suddenly he's gone off to Syria, and 2 3 months after that he blows himself up. So basically, in time span of 9 months, his total mindset changed.
Yeah, that's kind of like well, I was gonna say it's kind of like how when you get your first access to the internet, and then all of a sudden you run into all the conspiracy theories with 9/11, chemtrails, I don't know, whatever else there is out there, and if you're not prepared, it's like, holy shit, there's all this crap going on I didn't even know, and you can't sort out what's legit and what's not legit, so you just kind of take it all in, and you can see how people get into that so fast. I mean, I can recall a friend of, actually, with a friend who was a person I worked with, just got the internet access to his house for like the first time. He's 20-something years old. He came to work, and he's like, "Holy shit, dude! I gotta show you this thing. Don't you know there's aliens like everywhere? Aliens, like, dude, there's like, you gotta look. There's like spaceships, and there's like lights. Look at this." And he went through like this 20-minute tirade where he was convinced, and I was like, well. I'm always the kind of person like, well, I'll just bust his chops for a little bit anyway. So I was like, holy shit, dude, well, what are we going to do about it, we got to get out of here. And so,
but it's strange how some people think. Because last night, after the second Denmark shooting, not an hour after that, I already had the first Google talk with people who said it was all fake and made up. The bodies weren't even cold yet.
The disinformation gets out so much faster than the information. The right things get out. They come later, and it's like when you search Google for anything, if you put in vaccine, what are you going to come up with? First 95 things are going to be anti-vax, because that's what gets the most clicks, because that's what scares the shit out of people the most. It's, if I take this action, I could totally screw my kid over, and I don't want to be at fault for that. So let me get on board with all this. It doesn't come, they never get down to the 99th site where it's the CDC saying, like, listen, don't be an idiot, get your kids vaccinated so we don't have problems with measles. But
it's all clickbait. It's all clickbait. It's just
there should be a verification kind of thing that says, this website has been approved by a good majority of logically sensed people in the world.
There'd be a percentage of people who wouldn't view them still. They wouldn't get interested in the internet. They think the internet was boring. They think the internet was just a pile of, like, they think of it as like the library. It would become the uncool place because it's just people of all, factual. Well, I mean, libraries not.
Well, I mean, I think
in some ways, but
I say have the information out there. I mean, I don't think that there's any harm in people putting up, their theories about how 9/11, this, that, or the other thing happened, all the conspiracy. I mean, like, throw that out there if you want, but once it's been debunked and debunked and debunked, we can kind of say, like, can't we just tag everything that comes up? Like, when we see the new, it's just, 2015 now, so we'll see, like, the new version, the 2015 version of the 9/11 truth videos, and like information you didn't know from last year, about this year, and
sadly enough, that doesn't work like that, because the next 12-year-old Christian comes online the next year, who hasn't read or seen all those videos and websites, and starts talking the same bullshit all over again. So.
Well, that's right. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, if when that kid first comes online and he's like, oh, I heard at school that there was some bullshit about the moon landing or whatever, and go and they Google moon landing, there should, it would be really nice if like, things could be categorized in, like, here's the hard facts, here's what the experts say, and then here's another category over here, what the public says, And so you could kind of categorize things based on like actual professional opinion, as opposed to just any Joe Blow with the advertising dollars can be at the top of the list and tell you that, like, we never, this never happened, or this happened this way, or it was all done on a soundstage, or they're trying to get you to vaccinate your kids so that they can control their mind with chemtrails. I mean, we could just make stuff up all day long, right? I mean, we just keep throwing it out there, and eventually somebody will bite onto it. It would be really nice if we could, instead of having to fight that battle every single time it comes up with that 12-year-old, if he could just see that, yep, 95% of the world population is already deemed this nonsense. You're more than welcome to read through it and make your own decisions, but really, we're kind of done with it. You know what I mean? Like beta tape. It's over.
Well, the interesting thing about the anti-vaxxers and vaccines is, and something I didn't realise until I read it, was if you type in the word immunisation, there's no anti-vaxxers websites. Now, I've not done this myself. This was on a paper. It was a few years ago, so it might have changed now. But if you type in vaccination, it will come up with anti-vaccination websites and why vaccinations are harmful.com or whatever. Whereas if you put in immunisation, then that's kind of like a filter of, okay, if it comes up with immunisation, I'll say the chances are it won't be an anti-vax website. So just by simply changing the word, in the same way, if we create a new word for evolution or a new word for climate change, then this is the sacred word. Obviously, it's like when creationists hijack science, or anyone hijacks science. It's like spirit science. You hijack the word science. It goes, well, it got science in the title. It must be good. So then immunization then becomes, well, if we put immunization, anti-immunization, oh, doesn't that sound sophisticated? So it's this sort of constant, it's this evolutionary arms race of we put this and then they sort of steal this. It's like when you call him Dr. Dino or Dr. Kent Hovind, he's stealing the word doctor, or stealing the title of doctor because it sounds good, and that's the problem.
I have to agree with that, yeah.
It just becomes an arms race of, then we have to make, super mega awesome science, and they say, well, we've got, creation super mega awesome science too, and it's, it amounts to nothing in the end, but it's interesting to see how powerful science is, that people want to imitate it when they say creation science or whatever. It's not science, but what they're trying to do is hijack the good thing about science. But it's an interesting one that it's like trying to steal someone's good reputation by pretending to be them. I guess it's like, I'm a massive fan of Catfish, the TV show. I don't know if you've seen it, where people pretend to be other people online to get into online romances, and people try and be famous people because someone's trying to be Bow Wow and someone's trying to be this famous model or whatever it is, and they're just trying to steal their sort of reputation to I guess rightly or wrongly we value certain people in society of and I've noticed this more on YouTube comments is when I make a comment, a lot of people thumb it up just simply because I've got a lot of subscribers. So I put something that I think most people, it's not particularly insightful. It's just a case of, here's my view on this. And a lot more people thumb up my comments now than they did before, simply because they know me more. In the same way, when Claire commented on one of my last videos, or if King Crocoduck came on, or anything like that, it's very strange how we have this hierarchy almost, and in the same way that we like to almost not steal reputations, but reputation does mean a lot. And I went
There's
on
a different
five.
reason for that, I think, actually, the thumbs up
Fire
thing,
away, yeah.
because I think because the fact that they're all subscribed to you, they see, like, they get those little pop-ups saying you've commented here, and then they can just click it
Possibly, yeah.
directly. And then I
It might just
think
be, yeah.
so there's more traffic to your particular comment, like especially if you've commented on a thread where there's heaps of comments and people can't be bothered. I mean, I can't be bothered going through hundreds of people's comments sometimes,
Yeah.
But I mean, I could be wrong, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure that what you say has some.
Well, there's only one bad
to
thing between YouTube and Google Plus is when somebody watches a YouTube movie or video via Google Plus, it doesn't get the view count. So you only get the view count when people go to YouTube and watch the actual video. So it's kind of odd because it's the same company. So I guess they did that to prevent people from cheating. So
possibly, yeah.
What sort of cheating? Because I can go view it, and that counts as a view, right?
No, because perhaps people use a Google message on go watch this video to all their friends. Well, they can do that anyway, of course, but or have a lot of Google Plus accounts themselves and give themselves extra views. I think that kind of cheating. There was kind of cheating involved, but it's the reason they're not doing that. So
I
you
have,
really have to
yeah,
go to
I have
YouTube
heard of those
itself.
things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Some of the
But but on the
some of the
stealing,
biggest, what was
yeah.
his name? There was one of the, he was a big sort of fundy online personality, and he was found. I can't remember who showed this. It might have been Thunderfoot or something like that. But what's his name? He's the one that he's sort of a young. He's young. I don't know. Actually,
Venom
I think he's
Phoenix.
older than me.
I
Yeah,
was gonna say, yeah,
just saying that.
yeah.
I can't believe that got you there, but anyway. Yeah, Venom
Young guy.
Phoenix.
Oh, yeah, must be Venom Fangax.
Yeah, some young guy. Yeah. So yeah, his channel, he had been found to have forged, well, not forged, well, I guess it's forgery, views for like a number of his videos, and yeah, there were different ways you could do it. Um, yeah, that's
Yeah, he,
really,
he made a lot of sub accounts to comment on his own videos and stuff like that. That's basically what he did. And I think you, Thunderfoot, figured that out and made a video about it. But that's 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, I think. And he
I think that
kind
was
of,
how the world works. Actually, maybe the anarchist guy, how the world works. I think that's,
yeah, because people were commenting on him and making videos against him, and he used a lot of sub accounts on YouTube to go on to the counter videos and flag the videos down. I think that was the issue. I'm not sure. So
but
yeah,
it happened. It happened to me before. The worst incident I had was this idiot that went on that strategically downvoted all my videos and made sock accounts to do that. So he had about, I don't know, he had about 5 sock accounts, maybe not that many, but um, for me 5 dislikes is like it's like half of, well, if probably even more than that. It's like 70% of the likes or dislikes I'd expect to get. And on my statistics, it had something like 80 dislikes from Romania all on the same day, whereas on average I'd expect one per month maybe. So, but YouTube wouldn't. I told YouTube about it because it was gaming the system. I mean, I don't. It's just annoying because it's a poor representation, but they wouldn't do anything about it.
look, Quantum. I've been trying to tell you, man. Those videos you got on there, it's just, look, man. Those are real dislikes, and you're just gonna have to come to terms with that and move on. You know. I'm being silly. I am joking. That's pretty low for someone to actually go to that much trouble to make sub accounts and actually log in and click and log in and click and log out, and how many. Uh,
I
anyway.
can't imagine wasting that kind of time doing something so stupid.
Oh god, yeah.
I guess people just have time, that sort of time to waste.
I think,
I wish
yeah,
I wish I had that kind of time.
yeah.
Gee,
Although-
yeah. I
and,
wonder
and
what I could be doing right now. Yes.
it's amazing because in the past it was much it took a lot of more time to make YouTube accounts, and now basically you can do it in a few clicks on Google Plus. A new account, new account, new account, new account, new account. So
I remember
you
when you had to be invited for Gmail. I couldn't
Yeah.
get into Gmail for so long. So many of my friends had Gmail for years, and by the time I could like get an invite comfortably, I just sort of kept with Hotmail for ages until it was just got so bad. It was just
yeah, I think you mean Gmail was linked to MSN. I think the website or Microsoft Network. Wasn't that the case? That you had to have a Microsoft
nah,
Network account?
MSN was linked to Hotmail,
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and you
yeah.
had to eventually, yeah, because we all got MSN Messenger at school, and it was basically an extension of school because it was just all your school friends. And I mean, some people delved into adding other people from around the world and stuff like that, but most of us just it was just like we could all hang out after school online and chat about things. And then that linked into Hotmail and that type of thing.
Those are the days.
No one uses Messenger. It's crazy. Like that thing, that whole structure of having like more just an extension of the people that you know, being because it felt like you were chatting to a lot of people that you knew, from around the place and
Yeah.
that. And especially people
was
can sort of mimic that these days, but it's different with like Facebook and Instagram and these types of things where you're
I mean,
posting a picture or a video and that type of thing.
I think it's something to do with the fact that humans are inherently narcissistic, and Facebook accommodates that far more than MSN does. I mean, MSN was basically just a chat engine. I mean, and I preferred it to Facebook, whereas Facebook is sort of like, I don't know.
I've always continued to use them as chat devices. I mean, I still use Facebook for that main reason and that
Oh,
main
you
purpose. And that's
can use Facebook
to
to chat, but
contact my friends, you know what I mean? But
it's clear
I know,
that its
I
primary
know what you
aim
mean.
is
Yeah,
is
yeah.
not is not
The
for that. I mean,
appeal, yeah. The reason, as you say, the reason that it, MySpace took over MSN, it seemed. I think MySpace is, yeah, MySpace.
MySpace is
You're
basically gone
forgetting
now, isn't
about
it?
MySpace. Yeah, for sure. But the point was that, yeah, it was sort of a more culturally, I don't know, narcissistically cool thing to have or to do, I guess. And then, I don't know, in some ways Facebook sort of took over that. But then now, I mean, we're sounding out of touch. I think it's like a lot of percentage, if you poll young people, it's like Snapchat, Instagram, um, these types of things. Hardly any of them are using Facebook. Basically, Facebook's going to die, they reckon, eventually.
Yeah,
Basically,
but
the
it's,
same way.
it's,
Because
I'll be
because
I mean,
lost.
I find it very difficult to believe that the people are moving on. What is Instagram? I've never. I mean, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
Well, the thing is, Facebook bought Instagram, which was sort of interesting move because it sort of just links it to your Facebook. So everyone who has Instagram invariably has Facebook. I think I'm pretty sure that's how it's supposed to work, but I'm not entirely sure. Basically,
yeah,
Instagram
but
looks like Facebook to me. From an outsider's perspective, it looks like Facebook. It acts more like a Twitter, I suppose, because it's more image based. So I mean,
it's the only reason I have Facebook is because some of the websites can be you can log in using Facebook. Also some news media. That's the only reason I have Facebook. So
that's why they do those. That's why they do those things too.
yeah.
So that to add you to their user base. To
Sure,
add more.
and after that they can link all the information so they know where to
Yeah.
put the commercials. So that's the reason.
Oh yeah, for
It's
sure.
all a conspiracy, I tells you.
Yes, conspiracy. Oh please, it's all mind control. It also too about there was this paper that to do with the anti-vaccine. Going back to that just briefly, that there was a story on that horrible website, a gentleman by the name of Alex Jones. If you're unfamiliar with him, if you want to laugh, you can basically just listen to him talk on his show, or whatever. But anyway, he had on his website like the big page. It said, vaccines cause autism, and you click the link, and it's a story on his page basically. It doesn't go into any detail at all about the paper. It just says that that something like 3 out of 10 monkeys that were given a vaccine got autism, right? Now, I mean, the first thing that should be jumping at people when they read this is, wait, there was a sample size of 10? I mean, please, let's get real here. I mean, this is on the front page of his website, and you click that, and then it said at the bottom, here's a reference to the article, and you click that link, and it's an offshoot website, which is still on his network, which you can't see unless you go to the very bottom of that page and see that it's part of the Alex Jones network. And that sort of goes into a little bit more detail about the paper. But if you research the actual person who wrote the paper and the paper, you find out that the person who wrote the papers had their whatever it is taken away. I think they were a doctor. They've had their doctor taken away. Basically, it was a forgery. Basically the whole thing, and they forged all these sort of extra things on
Yeah,
the paper.
the guy from
through the
England.
journal. Yeah, but
Uh,
yeah.
I believe
Sorry,
there
go
was a
on.
guy in England. I'm not very up to date on the story either, and names and such. But there was a guy from England that basically forged the research in order to sell something. I am not sure what he was selling.
I think it was
Yeah.
Andrew. Is Andrew Newberg? He patented a vaccine and then was basically hired to find a flaw with the current one to sort of brand this one. If it's that one, it might be another one. I don't know. But just go back to quickly to the monkey thing. How do you diagnose autism in a monkey?
Well,
That's what I was wondering
well,
too.
well, yeah. So it's just something. I mean, many people talk about autism too. It's sort of not even completely accurate. I
it's
mean,
solvable.
the whole spectrum sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm going to diagnose all monkeys with autism because they have terrible verbal communication. You know, they have restricted and repetitive behaviour. I've never seen a monkey not eat a banana, and their social interaction. If I had a monkey with me, I don't think it'd be very sociable. So I think most of the monkeys do have
Not with
autism.
you, but within their own social circles. If you study the behaviors of the monkeys.
I've got a more interesting question.
So,
I've got a more interesting question. If there are still monkeys with autism, why are there humans with autism?
well,
Checkmate, evolutionist.
half the problem. Half the problem with yes, well, there's a lot of problems with our understanding.
With regards to the monkeys, one very interesting thing I read about was they had in this zoo they had some spider monkeys from South America, and they also had capybara, and I think there was some administrative error or something, but the capybara got put in the same cage as the spider monkey. And capybara are basically massive guinea pigs, massive aquatic guinea pigs. And the interesting thing was that in the wild, the capybara and the spider monkeys never interact. But in the zoo, an interesting symbiotic relationship developed entirely by accident, and the monkeys would actually use the capybara as like horses. They'd ride on them, and in exchange for that, the spider monkeys would pick little nits out of the capybara's hair, and I guess wash keep them all clean and things like that, which I think is kind of interesting that they were using them like taxis, like little horses. It was very.
No, that sounds amazing. That. I'll have to look into that. I hope there's a
But
video.
it does look bizarre because the capybara and the spider monkeys both live in the same in the wild. They do live in the same environment, but they never in the wild they never interact with each other. So it's just interesting that when they're put in the same sort of safari area, they interact in a symbiotic way.
Oh, that's I hadn't heard that, so no, very interesting. That's why it
So
has gone
maybe,
viral.
yeah. Actually, we were talking about autism, weren't we? I just picked up on the monkeys bit, but
Or you can talk about monkeys as well. They're always good. Although I was watching an interesting documentary about cute animals. It was on BBC, I think it was, a few hours ago. And why are cute animals cute? Something like that. And I didn't really understand it, but yeah, one of them was a actually, it was a monkey. It might have been a slow lorry. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, it was very interesting about why are cute animals cute, and yeah, sorry, just wanted cute animals there.
it is kind of odd though. Because, I mean, cuteness is an evolutionary trait. I mean, as far as I understand it, cuteness exists because basically, because creatures that have the same features as young human children are cute because cuteness sort of compels a sort of protection type reaction. So babies are cute because so that it compels the parents presumably to look after the children. So I guess that's why we find children cute and adults not. But it seems very odd that animals should be just as cute, if not even cuter sometimes than human babies, and to me that seems. I mean, what I reckon is, I mean, it's probably some sort of accident. I mean, in terms of evolution is by no means a perfect algorithm. It's probably some sort of unfortunate accident that a baby kitten it might well be cuter than a baby human, but it's interesting.
I think, yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I think it's like a supernormal stimulus. So basically, it's. I was going to say babies on steroids, but that's a terrible turn of phrase. But basically, it's like, they've got, kittens have got bigger eyes, or they've got, giant ears, or whatever the cute thing is. So, for example, there was I think I've forgotten his name now. Richard Dawkins, PhD supervisor, I've forgotten his name. Tindberg, there we go. And he was testing some sort of gulls, I can't remember what, some sort of like seagull thing that have a yellow bill and a red dot on their bill underneath. And that's where the chicks peck in order to get food. So they regurgitate food and they peck the mother's, punch myself in the face. Their mother's, so they peck their mother's beak to get food. So it's like, that's their mum, I'm hungry, and they go blah, and they give them food. And basically what they're interested in is what exactly was the stimulus that was eliciting it. So they got various different, like a model of a bird, and then a model of just a beak, and then they just had a yellow pencil with some red tape like wrapped around it. And they found the yellow pencil with the red tape was the highest amount of pecks and the highest amount of interest essentially. So basically it's the contrast between redness and yellowness, and because it was such a high contrast, so basically the bigger the redness, the more interest the child had essentially. So because it was a super normal stimulus, it was a stimulus that was bigger than normal essentially, or more expressive than normal. I don't know if that's the best word, but yeah. So it's basically the contrast between the two, and that seems to be what it is. It's a super normal stimulus that when you see, for example, Disney characters, they're human characters, but you see the giant eyes, and the females have giant eyes and tiny noses and like the small mouths and so on. So it's like extended the sort of the stereotype of what cuteness is. It's like big eyes and so on. And if you look at the characters, in proportion as it's not a human in any stretch of the imagination, but it's just an extended version. And some of these animals, like kittens and puppies and rabbits and so on, have this this extended almost this super normal traits, I guess. So.
Well,
Yeah.
I would guess it has to do with our own instinct, our maternal and paternal instinct to care for our kids, and in order to nature evolved most likely for us to like our kids, to enable to recognize our kids. It's a well-known fact that we see faces in everything, so we. Probably recognize a certain trait in a kid's face, large eyes, perhaps somewhat bigger head, and like cats or dogs, we see the same. We have the same facial recognition in those animals, so it's only natural that, especially the baby kids that also move in baby animals. I mean, that also move in a certain childish way, that we find those things cute. It's only natural, I think.
Yeah. In the same way, there was the other thing was baby elephants trying to learn how to use their their trunks. Don't know if you can learn how to use a tusk. But yeah, so in the first few weeks, it's sort of going all over the place. They can't really control it. And that's adorable because they're like punching themselves in the face and, missing their mouths when they're trying to put something to their, food or whatever. And it's just adorable because it's like, Bambi trying to learn to walk on the ice and so on. And it's this, like say, frailty and vulnerability and, the fact that we want to care for things because that's, parenting and so on. And no, it's very interesting topic.
Yeah, but another thing is, most people detest them, but I also like hyenas. I think they're adorable creatures, but they're basically predatory animals, and a lot of people, also tribes in Africa, associate the spotted hyena mainly with with evil and darkness, like we in Europe see bats. But I think they're cute animals. I don't know why, but yeah, it's very very odd how things like that work.
But you've got to be careful not to go because with the interesting thing is that something that is analytically, if you look at a face and try and alter it to make it more or less cute, there's an interesting phenomenon that happens. If you make something slightly less cute than cute, or just slightly less cute than cute, it becomes absolutely repulsive, and that's called the uncanny valley. So something that's very close to being cute but isn't actually cute it provokes a sort of repulsive type reaction. To look at it, it looks disgusting to us, and I mean that's interesting. It's the uncanny valley. There's lots of funny stories about this, particularly when manufacturers screw up on making a toy, and they try to make the toy cute, but instead of hitting the cute, they accidentally hit the uncanny valley because the uncanny valley is so close, and they hit the uncanny valley by accident, and the toys turn out to be ridiculously creepy, and no one buys them. I mean, other with things like people making robots that are supposed to the robots that try to look like people, and they turn out to be horrible because they hit the uncanny valley. Have you heard of the uncanny valley, Dave?
I'm glad you brought it up because I forgot the name, so I was frantically trying to Google it. But I'm glad you brought it up. But yeah, it is hilarious when you see them, and yeah, I suggest I'm going to try and find a link quickly before you wrap up of anything that's an example, because it's hard to articulate it. But yeah, it's just that threshold that they miss, and it's like, what is that? Kill it with fire. But yeah, no.
I recall a research, but I don't recall the results. But they took married couples and they showed both the female and the male of the couple, changed photographs of their husband or their wife, and they had to recognize their own wife, but it was a range of photos that was changed in a certain way, and they had to point out the photo they liked the most of their spouse. But I don't know. I think that's had something to do with that also, but I don't recall what the result was. But it was a very striking result. They never couples that were married longer were able to pick out the picture of their spouse that was very close to the photo, I think it was, and couples that were married for a very short time picked out a totally different kind of woman. So the picture that looked totally not like their spouse. But I'm not sure if that was correct. But
There's some interesting sort of ideas, studies about faces and facial recognition. It's different things, and I think isn't it supposed to be that symmetry?
I was just going to bring that up, actually.
Yeah.
How symmetry affects a lot of the things. When we view a face, if the left side is a little off from the right side, you might not even be able to perceive it, and point it out to be able, perceive it enough to be able to point it out. But there's there's something there that's not right with this person, and like you were mentioning earlier about, big eyes, small nose, big mouth, small ears, tiny bottom jaw, like these characteristics that we associate with this cuteness. You can get it just a little bit off, and it can be a real train wreck. And it's same thing goes with symmetry. You can have a person who's, and I think they've done this as well, where they've taken a model's face and they've kind of split it right down the middle and taken I guess you might say their worst half. So like, oh, there's the good side and the bad side, and they would just mirror it so that it would be absolutely symmetrical with the bad side, and then they would do the same with the better side, so it would be absolutely symmetrical. And then you could really notice the difference when you could see it in that context. So when it was like left with left, right with right, paired up, you could really say, like, wow, the guy on the left is like pretty cute, the one on the right, that guy's a train wreck. And it would just be like the same person, but just the side of the face that was flipped made that much of a difference.
Yeah,
There's actually these websites that related to that. I don't want to destroy anyone's self-confidence by suggesting this, but there are websites, and what they do is they test things, particularly, like as you say, the symmetry of the face. I think it works by they build up the face in terms of a load of vectors, and then they look at these vectors, and then the orientation and size of the vectors. It determines how attractive the face is. So I found one just by googling it. I know these things exist, but I don't want to take any responsibility for people going to these. But this one's called PrettyScale.com. Um, if you want to try it, then try it, but don't blame me if it gives you a bad score or a computer virus, because I haven't done it, but I have heard about these things and how they work using these sorts of these symmetry parameters, and what people say, what people have made a mockery of it, of course, by uploading things like cartoon characters and things like that, which of course it also works for. But there you go.
Yeah, the more symmetry, the more beautiful we find people. I also recall another research that was done between different age groups, and they researched what kind of a woman men find most attractive, but then not purely the symmetry, but looking at the age. And it turned out that men on average find women the most attractive when their face is halfway between a teen, a child, and a full adult. And that turns out that most women have a face like that when they are around the age of 20 years old. And that's basically when a woman is in her alleged sexual prime. So that's very striking.
Is it different for a man then?
I don't recall that they did that research. Oh. But there are researchers that show that on average women find men more attractive, older men more attractive, and men find younger women more attractive. So it probably has to do with how we acted when we were cavemen, I suppose. But I take no responsibility for the research. So.
Yeah, I know David Buss has done not longitudinal, the not multicultural. I guess yeah. I think in 82 countries, and it was basically what not mating strategies, but what do you see desirable in a partner? And like I say, in 82 countries of whatever, sample size, it is like status. Women prefer men with status and with power, and higher up on the hierarchy, and men prefer attractive, younger, for want of a better word, fertile women. So yeah, I think I know David Buss has done sort of research into that, and some of the people's names who escape me, but yeah, if you look up David Buss, he'll be able to, he's the guide, I guess, the evolutionary psychologist of the 21st century, pretty much.
So basically, when you're a woman and you live in a Muslim country, you have to make sure your burqa has full symmetry, else they won't marry you.
I was always under the impression that there was a whole lot going on underneath that burqa. Like there's a lot of competition between women as to what's going on underneath the bag.
Like mini skirts and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of like when you're out in public, the bag's the deal, and that's just, I guess it's supposed to keep the guys off you or something like that. I guess the thinking is that men are so incapable of controlling themselves that we better just put you in a bag for your own good and for everybody else's good, so we don't have to chop your head off when the guy rapes you or whatever it is.
It's interesting because. Yeah, because I also heard that in a country like Iran, where the women are allowed to show their face more than in some other countries in the neighborhood, that on plastic surgery they do a lot of more nose jobs than in Western countries, because, well, basically in Iran the face is the only thing you see, and so they are very insecure about how their face looks and how their nose looks. So a lot of the girls in Iran get nose jobs done.
What happens if you let them all the way out of the bag?
I don't know.
I
Yeah,
think we have I think we have a market here. Anybody want to get into plastic surgery? Now's the time.
I always wondered in the Muslim countries um, what happens on the wedding night when the girl does take off her full dress, and the first thing the guy thinks, or it comes up in his head, what, God, she's bloody ugly. And,
Well,
and,
how would he even? I was gonna say, how would he even know? He's never up until that point. He's never seen a woman at all, except for maybe mom and his sister. So maybe he's just under the assumption they all look like this.
yeah, so that could be an advantage for girls. Yeah. Right, it's actually kind of sad topic to talk about. We're joking about it, but actually it's pretty sad. So.
Yeah, you know, yep. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of jokes to be made there. Get in the bag for your own good. Why? You're ugly.
Oh my God, you're showing your ankle. You're a slut.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Well,
pretty
I
sad.
think on that note, we we we, we yeah, okay. I think on that note, we should probably finish off. I mean, we seem to have gone over 2 hours anyway. So thanks everyone for joining, and I don't know why I'm thanking everyone because I turned up for the last half hour.
Thank you for
better
finally
quit
getting
when you're
here. Thank you for changing your voice. I'm sure it would have appeared strange, or it'll
You
have some strange because I changed aliases a few times.
You need to tell people who you are, otherwise it's going to get really confusing.
It's
Because people are not gonna...
it's supernatural. Okay, it's our voices.
People are going to think that I adopt an Australian accent for no apparent reason, just completely arbitrarily.
I think you should go with that.
I know you're more intelligent than me. Come on now.
You need to tell them who you are, otherwise it's just going to get really confusing. But anyway, as usual, add me to your Google Plus circles, and you'll get a fortnightly invite. So thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Mordred for hosting it once again. Maybe eventually I'll get the time to do it myself, but anyway, thanks everyone.
Thank you.